I remember when I bought my first house, I had so many questions and having absolutely no idea what was actually going on. In this video today, we're going to be going over the 7 most common first-time homebuyer questions and answers. And make sure you stick around all the way till the end because I'm going to be saving the best question for last. What's up everybody, my name is Grant. I am a real estate agent in the Tampa Bay area, and this channel is all about what it's like to live, buy, sell, and invest in the Tampa Bay area. If you or anybody you know are interested in making the move to the area, don't hesitate to reach out. I would love to book a call with you, and then we can decide whether or not it might make sense for us to work together. And without further ado, let's jump right into this video. Question number 1 is, what is the first step? Even though there are technically a lot of first steps that you need to take, if you're thinking about making that first purchase, the first step is going to be not getting in touch with a lender, even though I know a lot of you probably think that's the first step. The first step is simply looking at your bank account. Do you think that you have enough funds to make a purchase of a home? And you don't need a lender to tell you how much money you have in your bank account. And oftentimes, you're gonna need at least roughly 5% in total for the down payment, and then another 2 to 3% towards closing costs. So before you even contact a lender, you can go ahead and just look online, see if you can find homes that you think you'd be willing to purchase within a certain price range, and see if you had 5 to 10% saved that you'd be willing to spend on a house. And if the answer is yes to that question, then the next step would then to be get in touch with a lender, because there's no point in contacting a lender to see if you're qualified if you have $0 in your bank account. So technically step 1 is make sure you have money. Then step 2 would be to contact a lender to make sure you're qualified. And if you don't have enough money, then step number 1 is going to be to start budgeting, see where your funds are at, and either start saving up as much money as you can or start working a little extra so you can save more money. Because at the end of the day, you can't do anything unless you have the funds to close. Question number 2, is there a fee to use a buyer's agent? Now, when I first bought my house, I wasn't a real estate agent at the time. That was over 5 years ago, and I did not use a real estate agent when I bought my first house. We're gonna go through these list of questions, and I'm sure they could have answered almost every single one of them, but I had to go through blindly because I thought that I would be able to save some money by not using a buyer's agent and not having to worry about paying them, or potentially the listing agent would find me more favorable to work with if I didn't have another buyer's agent that the commission would have to be given to. And I learned that that was not necessarily the case at all. But the quick answer is no, there's absolutely no fee to use a buyer's agent. Most of the time, in certain states that may be the case, but here in Florida, in our area, the seller is the one who pays the buyer's agent. Every agent can see once the home is listed in the MLS, there will be a section for how much they would be willing to pay the buyer's agent. So that helps the buyer's agent know how much they'd be getting paid, which would range anywhere from 2 to 3% roughly. So you don't have to worry as a new buyer or first-time home buyer to actually pay an actual buyer's agent. And I would always suggest that you try to reach out to some in the area to see if it might make sense for you to work together. If they're good at what they do, there's gonna be a lot of value that they could bring to the table. For example, answering all of these questions that I'm gonna be talking about. Which leads me into the next question, question number 3, and I had this same question when I bought my first house, is the down payment a part of the closing cost? That is probably one of the biggest questions I get all the time, because it's very confusing. Because they tell you if you go online, if you go on a Zillow down payment calculator, you go into a mortgage calculator, sometimes they may or may not include how much it actually costs to close on a property. And what they may or may not include is the extra 2 to 3% for the closing cost, and that is going to range in regards to your closing cost, which is completely different than your down payment. Let's say you were putting 5% down on a property. That's gonna be 5% of the purchase price Plus, there's going to be another 2 to 3% on top of that purchase price, and that's going to range from home insurance, home taxes, and usually you pay up to a year's upfront of home insurance. You'll pay 6 months upfront of home taxes. That's going to include your lending fees. That's going to include any of your title fees, your title search fees, anything that you had to pay the title company, your appraiser, and that actually will not include, most likely, the cost to actually inspect the property. And some people may not tell you this, or you may not know this up front, but you usually, at least in my area, you usually get about 3 different types of inspections on the property, and that's at the bare minimum. The 3 types are going to be your basic home inspection, in which that's where the inspector is going to check out the entire property, run you a full report, and go over it with you, all the good, bad, and ugly of the property. The second type is going to be your 4-point inspection, which that's for insurance reasons, and that's going to cover the 4 major categories of a property, which is going to be electric, plumbing, roof, and AC, and that's for insurance as well. And then the third type is going to be wind mitigation, and that's created for insurance as well. Usually that's going to cost $300 to $400, and that doesn't include if the property may be a fixer-upper, or if the property has potential remediation needed, or what we'd call sinkhole damage. So then you're going to have to get a sinkhole report done by a licensed engineer. They're going to have to go out there. Sometimes it's for free, sometimes it might be a few $100s, or if the property is on septic and well, you're going to need that inspected as well. So the simple answer is no, the down payment is not a part of your closing. So you can add whatever your down payment is, add another 2 to 3% of the purchase price, and that's going to be what your total out of pocket is. And if you're not sure, make sure you talk with your lender so you can get the exact figures. If you're enjoying this content so far, make sure you like and subscribe for more weekly content just like this, and comment down below when you bought your first house or when you're thinking about making that first purchase. Let's get right back into the video. Question number 4 is, where does my earnest money deposit go? That's the same question I had when I bought my first house. I knew that I was submitting it to the title company, which is where you submit it, usually within 3 days of going under contract. But I had no idea if that was supposed to go towards my closing costs, supposed to go towards my down payment, or if that was included in my total cash to close estimate that I was given by my lender. The simple answer is the earnest money deposit is going to go directly towards your total closing cost. For example, if it cost you cash to close, not including your escrow deposit, $30,000, and you put $5,000 within escrow, your cash to close at the end of the day is going to be only $25,000. You have to be very careful and make sure that when your lender is sending you your cash to close estimate, you want to make sure that that estimate does or does not include your earnest money deposit, and you want to be very clear on that, because the last thing you want to do is end up costing you an extra $5,000 to $10,000 at closing because you weren't aware that that was or was not added to your estimate. And the earnest money deposit is simply just a show of faith, showing that you have the funds, or at least partial of the funds, to potentially close, as well as if you were to breach contract, then the seller may have some type of repercussions and be able to keep that if you default on the contract. But you usually don't have to worry about it as long as you back out within the exit clause, or if you get close to closing day but the lender actually disqualifies you from the actual loan, then you still have your shot to get your earnest money deposit back. All these things that I'm talking about, though, you're going to want to heavily discuss and hopefully have a good agent that can sit you down and explain all these things to you, because the last thing you want to do is lose all your earnest money deposit. Question number 5 is, do I have to waive my home inspection to win a multiple offer situation? And there honestly is no clear answer to that question, because I would say it depends. It really depends on the situation. For example, I'll give you 2 different scenarios. If you were a standard first-time home buyer and you've never purchased a home before, you've never been involved in real estate, and you're not necessarily sure what you're doing, unless you had a great agent that may be a family member, friend, or someone you can completely trust, you're gonna almost want to never waive your home inspection just to win the property, because honestly, it's probably not going to be worth it at the end of the day. Because what happens is the home is inspected, and then there's lots of things that are uncovered that you did not know about before because you didn't inspect things as close as an actual home inspector would do. As well as, Even worse is that if you waive your home inspection on a property, you have to make sure that you are or are not waiving your exit clause, because most of the time when someone waives their home inspection, right, usually they'll have a 7 to 15 day home inspection clause or exit clause stating that they can back out for whatever reason the buyer sees fit. So if you're buying a home and you want to waive the inspection, you need to make sure that you have that exit clause in there so you can go in there and look at it yourself, because sometimes if you're a licensed electrician, plumber, handyman, sometimes you don't need an inspector to necessarily tell you a lot of these certain things that you could go look at and see yourself. Even though you're still going to need a 4-point and wind mitt for home insurance reasons, if you feel confident that you can go ahead and do it, I would say go ahead, because as long as you have that exit clause protecting you, then you should be fine. Scenario number 2, where it might actually make sense to waive the home inspection, and this actually happens all the time, even if you're buying your first home, because a lot of times somebody may be a traveling nurse, a traveling anything, may not have bought their first home, but they're interested in buying a fix and flip or a rental property, or just looking to invest their money in real estate in the area. I'll get first-time home buyers to where this property, I find them, is such a good deal to where it really doesn't matter about the home inspection. The home could need completely gutted, completely everything, or oftentimes the home inspection doesn't even matter because we know the property is trash and everything needs to be fixed. So at that point, waiving the home inspection almost happens all the time because it doesn't even matter because everything is going to be fixed. As long as there's no sinkhole evidence, and we may get an inspection to make sure the septic's working if that's the case. So to sum it up, I would say if you're experienced doing handyman work or knowing about homes, just haven't bought your first home, then it's okay maybe to waive the inspection, but I wouldn't recommend it. Question number 6 is, how do I get out of this contract? Let's say you find a home, you go through the inspection, you find out a bunch of things about the home you didn't like, it was too much for you to handle now, and now you want to back out. Well, lucky for you, there's 2 different ways that a buyer can get out of a contract and get their money back, as in their escrow deposit, no questions about it. The first way is simple, is by sending in writing a release and cancellation form of the contract and your escrow deposit within the inspection period. If you do that, no questions about it, there is no arguing, you get your escrow deposit back. You're not going to get the fees that you paid for your inspector back because you have to pay him for what he's done, but you will simply get your escrow deposit back, no questions about it. Very little times is there going to be any argument, especially if you're within the exit clause period. The next way that you can possibly get out of contract, if you get past the inspection period or the exit clause period, you get all the way to the day of closing, and then the lender says to you, you are not qualified to buy this house. I know it's unfortunate that you made it this far, but if that happens within a certain time period, let's say there was a 30-day lender approval period, as long as you get notified by your lender within that approval period that you're not qualified to buy the house, you will then be allowed to get your escrow back as well. Even though that you had to hold up the seller, it's not technically your fault. Right now, we're just gonna say it's the lender's fault. You know, sometimes there's things we cannot control. So that is way number 2 to make sure that you back out and get your escrow deposit, no questions about it. Other than that, let's say you get all the way to closing and you say, I changed my mind. Legally, that's not how it works. You can't just change your mind. And the seller does have the right to sue for performance and to make the buyer perform to actually buy the property. But sometimes the seller is going to have to sit back and think, is it worth my time to try to sue this buyer to perform, to buy this house that he obviously doesn't want to buy anymore, or maybe isn't qualified for some reason anymore, or doesn't have the money? Is it worth my time to try to sue him to make him perform on that transaction versus putting it back on the market and trying to find another buyer that is willing, able, and ready to buy the property? And oftentimes when the sellers or even buyers, because this can happen in reverse, have to look at that scenario, oftentimes, unless they're really, really stubborn, they're just gonna let it go. That's unfortunately the truth, and you should never practice real estate thinking like that, but that is the case. I have had multiple situations, which is unfortunate, but I'll give you a quick story to where I ended up selling my client's condo for him. He wanted to sell his condo. We got a price that he was happy with. we're a week before closing, and the seller says, I don't want to sell anymore. Again, that's not how it works. The seller really can't back out after that point. But what he does is says, I'm not showing up to closing, which he needs to do that to be able to close and be done, but he's not going to do that. So he's not showing up, he's not answering any phone calls or texts, and he said, you can get your attorneys involved and forcing me to sell it if you need to. And that's what he said, and that's what the buyers planned on doing. But then they realized it's going to take 6 months to a year. It wasn't worth their time or effort to try to hold them up. So next thing you know, they just gave up. Unfortunately, that's the truth, but that can happen as well. So that can be option number 3, is to just hold out and illegally, don't perform on your contract and just hope you don't get sued. And that leads me to question number 7. And that's simply, are the sellers trying to scam us, or are the sellers trying to back out of this deal? And there's a very simple answer to this question. As long as you, the buyer, and the lender, and the buyer's agent all work together and follow the contract and all of the deadlines, such as the inspection period, the escrow deposit, loan approval, the appraisal date, as long as everything is followed correctly, once you go under contract, the seller can't back out. There is no legal right for the seller to back out. And if they do, you can easily, as the buyer, sue for performance, as in force them to sell their property to you. So as a buyer, there should never be a worry once you go under contract of the actual seller trying to back out. That's never going to be the case. And if they do, that is not legally how it works. Once you sign an agreement, you essentially are stuck with that until both parties agree to disperse. Make sure you guys subscribe for more weekly content just like this, and hit that like button down below, hit that notification bell to get notified every week when we do a new video, and I will see you guys in the next video.